Hi, my name is Chloe. I'm here today talking about two related psychoanalytical concepts that helps us to understand human behavior and their impact from a developmental psychology perspective. So the two concepts are the pleasure principle and also the reality principle. So let's get started with the pleasure principle first. So the pleasure principle is not exclusive to psychoanalytical thinking. It is also well established and researched in other disciplines such as philosophy and psychology. So what this pleasure principle tells us is that human behaviors are largely driven by this desire to seek gratification, to maximize pleasure, and to avoid pain. So in essence, human behavior is seen as largely pleasure seeking. Okay, so if we take the pleasure principle and we contrast that with the Freudian personality construct of the ego, id, and superego, we can see that actually the pleasure principle operates pretty much like how the id works. Okay, so the id refers to these psychic forces which is instinctual, its urges, its demands. It has this urge to seek immediate gratification. Okay, so from a developmental psychology perspective, we can see that the id is seen as most active in early infancy and early childhood. And then the pleasure principle can be seen as dominates how the id works. So the example will be when we have a young baby or young child, if they want something, they want it straight away. It's I want it now. Their brain is not well developed at that point to actually allow them to regulate their urges and emotions. They don't yet have the ability to tolerate the wait. So they want something straight away. Freud later on introduced another concept, which is the reality principle. So the reality principle refers to the mind's ability to assess the external reality of the external world and to assess the demands of the external world so that it has an ability to forego the instinctual drive for instant gratification, and then it comes to the conclusion to act in a socially appropriate and acceptable way. So in a way, we can say that the reality principle focuses on the socially acceptable outcome, the long-term goal, which is very similar to the maturation and strengthening of the ego, so how the ego works. So in a way, we can say that the pleasure principle dominates how the id works, and the reality principle dominates how the ego works. Okay, so from a developmental psychology perspective, we can say that actually the shift from early childhood into early adulthood and adulthood mirrors the shift from purely acting on the pleasure principle to the later acting on the reality principle. So I suppose when you're in secondary school, generally you're not acting purely on the pleasure principle. You're able to use your mind to assess the external situation, to look at the risks, to look at the benefit, to conduct that cost-benefit analysis, and to come to the conclusion to act in a socially acceptable way. They may not be possible every single time, but I like to think, a lot of the times as a secondary school student, you are able to act in a socially acceptable manner. Okay, so even though the pleasure principle and the reality principle are seen as contrasting principles, they actually have quite a lot in common. So in essence, they both focusing on the pleasure-seeking aspect of human behavior. Even though reality principle is to taking into account of the external reality of the world, still the ultimate goal is pleasure seeking. But the difference is the pleasure principle focusing on immediate gratification. So the urges, the demands needs to be satisfied immediately, regardless of the consequences. Whereas the reality principle refers to more mature, more responsible way of acting, even though the ultimate goal is still the pleasure seeking, but it's seeking to satisfy that needs in a more sustainable, more socially responsible, more socially acceptable manner. So we can see that the shift from the pleasure principle to the reality principle is the outline of how a person develops from early infancy into a more mature adulthood.